So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and here we have the Temple of Melkor map, which we have seen on occasion before, and it's kind of unique among siege battles in the sense that the way that the deployment zones are orientated are such that the attackers and the defenders for the most part are fighting on similar ground for the majority of the time. Obviously the defenders can manipulate the situation, especially in this part of the map, to still have that terrain advantage, but usually of course the attackers are used to fighting uphill the whole way, which would mean the deployment zone is way down there, which I think back when this map was first created it was as a scenario map, and that was the case. But you can't engineer the deployment zones to be that way around when you use it as just a normal map, so for the most part instead we have the map played on sideways rather than the normal orientation that you would expect a siege battle to be in. Again, this is a battle that doesn't really have too much of a theme. I think the attackers, the blue team today, are going to have more evil factions in their ranks, but it is going to be, for the most part, again, a little bit of a jumble, but I think the defenders are... You could make a case for all of the attacking factions today to have been conquered at some point by evil, whereas all of the defenders probably less so. So we have Sevapi 500, who's playing as Harad. Lothlorien pikemen, we have got some Demons of the Desert in there as well. Very, very devastating unit of javelins, of course, but can be a lot more difficult to use than the other really devastating projectile units in the game, because you have to get a little bit closer, and they are pretty vulnerable to skirmish fire, and Harad are not the best at dealing with that sort of thing. Anyway, the Lothlorien archers are here to make sure they have some sort of combat that they can engage in at long ranges. More pikemen as well as the Lothlorien warband, so even at these lower levels, of course, Harad do have a bit of armour piercing, which will come in pretty handy as the battle wears on. We've got some dismounted Serpent Guard over here as well. As far as a regular unit of line infantry goes among the human units, they're pretty good. They lack some of maybe the defensive ability that some of the Western units have, but they're pretty good in melee, and you can upgrade the armour, albeit Harad haven't had the ability to do so here, probably due to money. Lothlorien warband, we of course have the Trollmen, which are the heart and soul of any good Harad infantry force, and the vast majority of that comes down to their very, very potent armour piercing, as well as their second hit point. More Serpent Guard over here as well, so a good infantry force this, reasonably solid. Of course the Mumakil are here as well. Can be a little bit of a risk, especially in a cityscape siege like this, where the Mumakil can, kind of the pathfinding can let you down, and then they can take a lot of damage very quickly because they are such big targets, in spite of their ludicrously high stats. But yeah, interesting to see how they get on here. Obviously not to be underestimated as the range damage they can do over time as well. We've got the Lothlorien warband, and then at the back we've got another unit of Serpent Guard, and then Champions of Nafra up here on the walls as well. More Trollmen also, so no real surprises there from Harad in this sort of situation. Heavy on the Trollmen, heavy on the infantry, and then the Mumakil as a bit of a wild card. We have Nuke, who is the player who we're going to be seeing the battle from the perspective of today, playing as Cardolan. Tharbad Warhammers without the armour upgrade, but again, big armour piercing. They achieve it in a slightly different way, I suppose, to the Champions of Nafra, who are all about that upfront punch and having, you know, an extra hit point, I believe it is. Whereas the Tharbad Warhammers, obviously in a more typically Western style, have got better armour and better defensive abilities, so they're not completely reliant on those hit points of theirs. But both very damaging armour-piercing infantry. We've got Ruffians, we've got Cardolan and Man-at-Arms as well, not too surprising to see them. Obviously reasonably solid with their big shields and armour, but morale could be an issue, so they need to keep themselves topped up there. Tharbad Tollkeep is very much the same sort of thing. Among regular rank and file spears, they are not particularly damaging at all, but they are very resilient, especially when it comes to absorbing arrow fire, which is going to be useful in this sort of situation, you would imagine. We've got the Gatekeepers, a higher end unit of crossbows, crossed with halberdiers in melee, so again, very good hybridized unit there. We've got the Wardens of Tir Gorthad, very important unit for Cardolan. They anchor the line in place like any good unit of Planks does, but also they boost the morale of nearby units, which is obviously very, very key. Hearthguard of Amon Sul being the really tanky unit of bodyguard tier archers with spears as their melee weapon. Trebuchet of Numenor back here as well, and this is the sort of map where attacking artillery can be pretty deadly, just because, again, like I said, you're marching along the settlement rather than through it, really, so you're less likely to have terrain work against you. We've got the Cardolan archers here, also a couple of units of them to help skirmish, and then a couple of units of the Thieves of Tharbad with those throwing projectiles of theirs. Moving on to the third attacking army, we have Ricky Beagle playing as Umbar. We've seen quite a lot of Umbar lately, and obviously their quality has been reasonably good across those battles as well, as you would expect, the Alcarondas Legion being the heart of many of their attacking efforts. We also have the Umbar X-Guard, who, as we mentioned last time around, they've had their numbers increased, although their overall quality slightly knocked down. But I think this is a good trade-off because it gives them a numerous unit of deadly infantry that they can send forward with that armor piercing. And if you upgrade the armor as well, they are still pretty resilient, especially considering the class of unit that they are. Kind of similar to the not the Alcarondas Axe-Guard, the Axe-Guard of Lasarnak of Gondor. Alcarondas Legion here, we've got the Corsairs once more. Balagai pikemen in high numbers, so again, having those pikes to push forward later on can be very, very useful. And then the very resilient Naru Sentinels with thick armour and good shields. They get around the primary weakness of most pikes, which is being weak to arrow fire. Harbinger's very strong unit of heavy swordsmen. We've got the Balagai Archers, Corsairs, more Alcarondas Legion, and more Balagai footmen, albeit this one without the armour upgrade. And we did see in the background as well with the rest of the Umbar army, they have another Trebuchet of Numenor, this one in the red rather than the green of Cardolan. And then we've got the Naru Royal Guard, who, much like Cardolan actually, very similar to the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, spears in melee, very, very tanky archers at long range. More Alcarondas Legion, Umbar Axe-Guard, so a huge amount of Alcarondas Legion in the Axe-Guard here, which makes sense if you're on the attack, you want to be able to push forward reasonably fast. Moving on to the fourth army, we have Mevin, who's playing as Canned. Interesting army, Canned. Very often in a siege they forego a lot of their horse archers. But we've got the Variag Warriors, one of the cheaper units of two-handed swords in the game. With the armour upgrade though, they can be a surprisingly efficient unit against quite a lot of forces. They do have the Variag Horse Archers, which is good to see because obviously Canned with their Horse Archers is one of the strongest parts of their army, so it's good to see them make use of that. And the map is big enough and sort of labyrinthine enough that cavalry like this could be used to really good effect. We'll have to wait and see. And then the Chieftain's Vanguard are, of course, the very colourful, very tanky bodyguard horse archers that can have available to them. We've got the Nurad Footmen and Nurad Halberdiers, which are, of course, as ever in a siege battle, going to be the heart and soul of what Canned are trying to do as they push through the settlement. We've got the Nurad, or Nomadic Archers back here, very tanky unit of archers as well as the Nurad Windblade, so another unit of cavalry, so they have invested pretty heavily into their horsemen here. Brotherhood of the Bow as well, and not exactly cheap, so definitely in terms of fast movers, Canned are going to be the ones to handle that with all of their Nurads and Variags moving in support of their allies. Speaking of which, the final attacking army, we have Dorwinion, played by the Warlord, obviously the men and elves dressed in purple. We've got the Nandor Glade Riders, who do have, so another unit of cavalry as well. Interesting choice that, because they're a very sort of flimsy but very deadly unit of shock cavalry. So if they can be used to good effect, they could be devastating, but the chances of that being true are reasonably limited. We'll have to wait and see. Helvellyn Marksmen, of course, very good at skirmishing with the enemy, which will be a strength of the defenders, as we'll get onto in a moment. River Patrol, cheap javelins, always going to be useful in a siege. Plenty of the Helvellyn infantry and Vinegard as the backbone of the Dorwinion efforts here. Again, they're resilient and they've got good stamina as well, but there is the, they don't have the damage dealing capability that the Elven units do. Orquendi Glade Lord, so another expensive unit of cavalry. Certainly they're not lacking for strong, fast movers here. And then the Helvellyn Hammer Guard as well, which is where the general is. Very strong unit of shielded but still armour-piercing heavy infantry. And that's pretty much it. There could be a few hidden units for Dorwinion as well. Moving on to the defenders, we have, to start with, Elves of Lothlorien, who, you can only assume that the orcs are long gone if the elves are defending the Temple of Melkor. But yes, hidden playing as them. Galathryn Riders, they're going to have a little bit of a difficult time of it, you would imagine, considering the horse archers of Canned and also just the melee cavalry of all of the factions, well, mostly Dorwinion and Canned have brought the fast movers for the attackers, like we said, so they're not going to have the most amount of room to move around. Of course, Galathryn Spearmen, I mean, when you've got the money to play with as the elves in a 5v3 like this, you're always going to have a huge amount of quality on display, so mostly it's going to be Galathryn Axemen and Galathryn Spearmen. We've also got in there the Galathryn Nobles, who are, of course, the footbound variant of the Silverthorn Archers. They've also got the Guardians of Caras Galadhon in there, the only multiple HP pike unit in the game. Kindred of Celeborn are in there, obviously throwing axes are a real strength of Lothlorien these days. And then you've got the Lorien Spearmen as well, so all in a giant big clump, but we know what to expect from Lothlorien when they've got this sort of budget. There are the Kindred of Celeborn poking out the back as well. Moving on over to here, the second defending army is going to be Tommy, who's playing as Dale. He has got the upgraded Bardian Marksman. Certainly when it comes to skirmishing, Dale are the ones that are probably the most comfortable faction in the whole game at doing that, just because of the numbers they can bring. If you do bring the full gamut of archers that they do have, it does compromise you in other ways, but could be that this is a good opportunity to do so. You've got the Bardian Marksman, like I said, good in melee as well. Got the Dalian Spearmen to act as a good front line, but I think the main crux of Dale's front line are going to be the Barding Herd, strong unit of Halberdiers, and obviously they're going to be useful at dealing with the armoured units that Umbar, Cardolan and Dorwinion are all going to be bringing to the table today. Very strong unit of horse archers as well, and the Athala Rangers, again, they are very, very damaging, but will they be given the licence to actually move in the way that they would like, given the amount of cavalry that Cand in particular have? We'll have to wait and see. We've got more Barding Herd, we've got Dalian Spearmen back there, Bardian Marksman. There is the Wind Lance in there as well. We can't really... there's the actual Wind Lance as well, with the crew being wielding the same halberd that the Barding Herd do, albeit they wield it more aggressively in the same way that the Fountain Guard wield their pole arms. Dalian Swordmasters as well. I mean, not the strongest unit of Swordmasters from a damage dealing perspective in the game, but good armour, and also, you know, reasonably, they're not overpriced, shall we say. So especially when you fold them into the rest of the Dalian roster, they give you a little bit more skill, because they're certainly not poor in those regards, but in comparison to a faction like the Elves, for example, they are going to be a little bit lesser. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers with their handheld wind lances, so that armour piercing from afar, always going to be handy. A couple more unit of Spearmen, as well as some more Dalian Swordmasters, so going heavily in for the Spearmen and the Swordmasters, and also the Dalian Paladins, of course, a very strong unit of armour-piercing shock infantry with those great maces of theirs. Athala Rangers, and then the Dalian Royal Guard, and a second unit of Blackshot Dragon Slayers as well. So 2 mounted Rangers, 2 of the armour-piercing archers, so red limit, but that's not really a problem when it's a 3v5, because you're going to have the number to go into the red limit on some of these more important units for you. And finally, the last defending army is going to be Ding Da King, who's going to be playing as Arthedain, and actually the second artillery piece for the defenders, another Trebuchet of Numenor. So there's 3 on display today, 2 for the attackers, 1 for the defenders. Arthedain, of course, with their black colour scheme, the fully upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms and pikemen, unsurprising, as well as the heavy swordsmen as well, the defenders of Fornost Rhine. Obviously, when you have this amount of money to play with, you're always going to go heavily in for the armour upgrades where you can. We've got the High Lords of Annuminus, who are one of the strongest unit of sword and border infantry that the game has to offer. Really, it's only the dwarves that actually sort of equal the High Lords of Annuminus in many ways, so it's a real boon for Arthedain to have this sort of unit in their roster. I did see as well, in and amongst things, the Wardens of the North, which again shouldn't be too surprising. That's a lot of armour-piercing archers the defenders have. We've got plenty of the Arthedain Spearmen as well, fully upgraded, as you would expect, and the Annuminus Gate Guards as well. They also boost the morale of the rank and file. One thing to bear in mind with Arthedain, of course, is the fact that their Dunedain units can hide, so obviously there's going to be Rangers, and obviously there's going to be Troll Slayers, because they're simply too potent to pass up in this sort of situation. But I'll make a little bit of a cut, because there is going to be a little bit of moving around for the defenders and the attackers as we get into position. It's really down this gorge in the middle where we often see the battle get underway. So yeah, I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin as the battle is about to get underway. So the first salvos being loosed by the Dalian archers into Umbar's position, with the Alcarondas Legion, admittedly with their shields not pointing the right way, being the target, and also artillery streaking through the sky just over there. The Athala Rangers were the choice of missile unit as well to shoot into the Umbar infantry there. So lots of good damage potential there. We've got also someone taking the extremely long route around, Cand using this route through what is technically the front of the settlement after all, and they're going to go right the way around to ultimately only link up with Umbar. It's a very, very long route that they're deciding to take, but also the way that the deployment zones work out on this map is a little bit peculiar anyway, so not too much of an issue there. We've got the attacking artillery in place as well from the Cardolan troops. So they're going to be leading the way here with some Dorwinion support. Umbar still moving around a little bit, although it looks as though Umbar perhaps are the ones to start getting things underway from a melee standpoint. And I mean, infantry to infantry, Umbar certainly have the edge over Dale, but in this sort of terrain it should be where the Dalian skirmishers come into their own a little bit more. Dalian Spearmen on the front with the Barding Herd backing them up immediately. The Barding Herd are the one unit perhaps that Umbar will be a little bit worried about, even with some of their stronger units of infantry when it comes to engaging Dale on the front line. They might want to get their own supporting units a little bit closer to be able to deal with this sort of thing, but Alcorondas Legion taking hits in the back from the Bardian marksman as well. Again, when the shields aren't coming into effect, as much as the armour will do a lot of heavy lifting for a unit like this against basic archers, that damage is still going to add up, and the Alcorondas Legion are not the cheapest unit in the world. We do pay for that quality that Umbar are capable of deploying on the front line. Meanwhile, fully upgraded Belagaya pikemen heading onto the front line, maybe get a bit of range on those Barding Herdsmen. Blackshot Dragon Slayers getting a little bit closer as well. Pretty early to be using armour-piercing archers, but it is a very clear shot, and it's better than waiting too long to use your high tier units, and that's going to do a lot of damage to them very, very quickly. The Rangers are moving in, which is a little bit peculiar perhaps. I mean, you can use them as a bit of a mass pushing unit here and really ripping through those units very, very fast, so it's not the best of starts, to be honest, from a Umbar perspective. Meanwhile, way over on this side we've got Arthedain marshalling against the advance of Harad. Moving up this way. Southward archers starting to move in. Ooh. Was that defending artillery? Where did that even come from? Shooting downhill. Yeah, so hitting their own units there, Arthedain, which again, very in keeping with what we've seen of late with artillery pieces. They seem to be magnetically attracted to hitting their own units. The Arthedain Spearmen, the unfortunate recipients of all of that damage this time. Harad not in any great rush to go for a full-on engagement against Arthedain, though. That's where their lack of defensive nous would start to hurt them, especially against Arthedain's defending skirmishers as well. I mean, all of the defending armies here, Lothlorien, Dale and Arthedain, are going to be very, very strong when it comes to doing damage with archers. If they can set up some sort of crossfire with their higher tier units in that regard, it's going to be very, very nasty for the units involved. River Patrol and Hammerguard taking shelter within the structures. Dorwinion on their way across to offer a little bit of support to Umbar. The River Patrol moving forward. The Alcorondas Legion not completely gone yet, but with the support of the Corsairs and with the front line now looking a little bit fraught from Dale, sending some units back, perhaps trying to avoid the fate of getting hit by those javelins, but Dalian Swordmasters now rejoining the front line, which should stabilise things. They'll carve through the Corsairs, absolutely no bother at all. And the Athala Rangers continue to fire in. And Dale have got a very good crossfire setup over here, actually. Kindred of Caliborn on the way across as well, so no rest for the weary when it comes to Umbar and Dorwinion's chances here. Belagaya Pikes. Victory. Caliborn not using their throwing axes first, which I think is probably not the idea that Hidden had in mind. I think he was probably trying to move them over here so that they could throw their projectiles in, but this also means they're going to be fully in the view of the River Patrol, and that's not exactly the kind of trade the defenders would want to be taking. Is the obvious choice of target. Blackshot Dragon Slayers are back there as well. Not sure the Javelins quite have that sort of range, mind you. Vanguard managing to find a little bit of a gap. And this is maybe a bit of a serious oversight actually from Dale, because if there is now the opportunity, especially now the Kand are arriving with some of their units, that they could flood through this gap that has appeared. Guardian Marksman there also. Vanguard will be able to hold for a while, so there is a good amount of time for the attackers to be able to take advantage of this, should they so choose. Again, the Variac Horse Archers, a lot of the projectile units so far have had a bit of a habit of crashing into the melee engagement as it's happening. I mean, most of the time they have still been able to use their ammunition, so it's not the end of the world, but still it's a little bit clumsy. I mean, it could be an issue with pathfinding on this map, but still. Another unit of Alcorondas Legion moving forward, so Umbar not willing to allow this attack to sputter and die. considering the fact that there is still this gap that can be taken advantage of. Units on the way forward, Umbar, Axguard, perhaps the ones to try and make that happen. Meanwhile, up this central path, Cardolan have gotten proceedings underway over here. Very contrasting styles in terms of what the infantry are all about for Lothlorien and Cardolan, of course. Cardolan do have the numbers, as long as they can keep their morale topped off. Lothlorien's lack of numbers might prove to be a bit of an issue going forward, especially when you consider that you've got those Cardolan sharpshooters there, and in the back and forth the elven arrows are very, very strong, but the crossbows are going to be able to easily match them. And they've got this kind of angle. This is a trade Cardolan would take, because as long as the elven archers are not shooting into their infantry on the front line, that's keeping the attack going, it's not really what the defenders would be wanting to use their ammunition on. Harad now also getting things underway against Arthedain, who are also going to commit a unit of elites very early on, the High Lords of Voluminous, who will be pretty comfortable against most of what Harad have to offer. Champions of Nafarat and the bleeding edge of their armour-piercing infantry, perhaps not, but that's probably not what Harad are going to be committing forward early doors here, because of the threat that Arthedain's archers do pose, the Dunedain Rangers. Fire arrows, I mean, can break Harad. They are by no means the most mentally stalwart faction in the game, but maybe a little bit early to be doing that, especially ranger fire. More worthwhile using your rank and file for fire arrows because of the added ammunition cost. Umbar, Axguard are on the front line. This front line is looking very thin for Dale now. More arrows streaking overhead though. Valiant infantry joining in on the front line. Things looking a little bit better for Dale over here, but the Swordmeisters are what is propping that up. Marksmen firing at point blank again. Dale's armour will help them, but talking about that sort of angle, Dorwinion will be pretty happy. Axeman. What are they going after? Looks like they're going after the Elvelin Marksman, actually taking a bit of a circuitous route with their throwing axes though. Marksman. The Rangers are still very, very close range. It's worked for them so far though, because they're still almost completely healthy, and I suppose part of the problem for the attackers is they don't, because of the movement of these units, they're not able to zero in on them with their own projectiles. Where Dale might start to fall down is the fact that some of their front line is looking a little bit ragged already. Guardian Marksmen now moving forward to help prop the front line up. Most of them had their swords drawn, so I assume they're out of ammunition, and obviously this is a very good hybridized unit in terms of their melee abilities. Oof. Big amount of damage coming in there from the attacking artillery. Cardolan's trebuchet. Guardian Marksmen and Dalian Swordmasters having to retreat behind the rock formations now. Last thing you need is the defenders in this sort of situation is to be subjected to that kind of damage. And it also routs the unit of spearmen that was already on the front line, so they're going to flee. River Patrol really throwing their javelins high. Most of those will miss, and even those that hit are not likely to result in too many kills, but still, any sort of damage is good damage for the attackers when the odds are like this. Catherine Rider's still there. Well, lots of stink clouds from the artillery. And again, I mean, this is the sort of thing which can hurt Cardolan in particular. You can see they're already wavering. The elves, it is of no concern to them. Their significantly stronger morale. Tharvad Tollkeepers being tasked with trying to deal with Sindar Blade Masters in melee. That sort of fight is only going to trend in one direction. Cardolan archers looping a few shots in. Galathrim archers. Some of these Galathrim spearmen are in behind enemy lines a little bit too far though, so they're going to get surrounded. And again, Galathrim units against the rank and file of Cardolan are going to be a tough nut for the Men of the West to crack, but they should still be reasonably okay as long as they continue to force numbers up here. But it doesn't look as though that's big on Cardolan's priority list at the moment. I mean, they have after all siphoned off their artillery to assist with Umbar's attack, so maybe it's all about just trying to keep this attack going. I mean, Lothlorien will be pretty happy with that, because it means they don't necessarily need the most numbers in the world to be able to hold on to this position. Always helpful for the elves. Still fire arrows finding their way into the Southrons, fighting on the front line. Arthedain, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Dismounted Serpent Guard on the way forwards again. And when they're taking this amount of arrow fire, this is where Harad are at their weakest. Even with some of their stronger defensive units like the Serpent Guard. Still not ideal for them. Dunedain Rangers. Troll Slayers as well. I mean, it looks like they've used up all their ammunition. That's pretty early for them, especially against more of the regular Harad units. I mean, as much as they're doing a lot of damage to Harad here, if they're using up a lot of these important resources like Ranger Arrows and Troll Slayer Javelins on basic units, it tends to work against defenders in the long run. In that classic situation where the defenders start off strong but then lose steam late on because they don't have the support in place any longer. Lothlorien archers also assisting, so Harad taking a real beating here at the hands of Arthedain and Lothlorien. Similar kind of story for Cardolan, although canned moving forward some of their horse archers now. Artillery strikes as well, so renewing the assault with some of the units that were hidden around the corner now, and Lothlorien as a result having to reconsider their situation perhaps. Still there, trying to use their own throwing axes. Our Blade Masters very limited in numbers now, though. Artillery streaking overhead, but somehow managing to miss. Arthedain's Trebuchet not playing ball. And still, I would suggest, just as long as they keep this attack going, it will be for the attacker's benefit in the long run. Both artillery pieces here, and Cardolan and Umbar looming. This is definitely where the attackers have focused most of their efforts, though. Dorwinion, Canned and Umbar, with the vast majority of what we've seen of them so far, attacking the Dalian front line. The Bardian Marksman, again another good choice of target. It's the backs of these Umbar Axe Guards, so they'll fall away pretty fast under these kind of attentions. Valid Marksman. Barding Herds still waiting in reserve. There's a few more Elven units as well. In terms of reinforcements are a little bit further back. Again, Lothlorien do have the occasional unit, but Lothlorien's bouncing trebuchet projectiles, but Lothlorien's army size in general doesn't really mean it's that conducive for them to be adding the bulk to this front line. There are Galadrim Axemen on the front line now, doing the business against the Elvalan infantry. Of course, that sort of quality is exactly the sort of thing where even Umbar's better units are not going to be able to secure them a significant advantage. Alien Swordmasts have done pretty well so far as well. Line Guard and infantry here in numbers. That Bardian Marksman unit still with the ammunition. Obviously their usefulness as a melee unit as well means that there is a certain incentive to use their ammunition just that little bit earlier, so you do have that extra infantry on the front line, which may prove to be pretty pressing for Dale pretty soon. Trollmen taking hits. I mean, the Trollmen do have those shields, of course, but still the complete lack of armour means that over time that archer ammunition is still going to be pretty deadly for them. Trollmen are on the front line now, though, and that's not a great situation for Arthedain. Most of their units are going to be fairly weak to them. I mean, the Dunedain, including the Troll Slayers, might well prove to be a little bit more of a problem for them. Troll Men could end up getting skewered by the Troll Slayers here, and indeed that is exactly what's happening. Very good choice of target. It's the class of unit which poses by far the biggest threat to Arthedain among Harad's roster after all. Still continuous ranged fire from both sides. Harad haven't been able to take as much of a scalp from Arthedain as you would expect, of course, but for Arthedain it's absolutely vital that they get good value from these kinds of units. Lothlorien as well. Second unit Dorwinion Rangers again, fire arrows, but trying to rout off maybe the Southron Archers a little bit earlier, but I would question whether that's the right choice of target. I mean, if you've got Arthedain marksmen, that's the job they should be doing, really, more so than Dorwinion Rangers. Cardolan men-at-arms who are charging, but immediately rout when they see that it's elves that are waiting for them. So this Cardolan assault actually now on the verge of complete collapse. Tharbad Tollkeeper's routing also. Balagire archers, so yeah, there's now no melee presence for Cardolan on the front line. Well, actually no, the Tharbad Tollkeepers are still fighting kind of behind enemy lines against these Sindar Blade Masters, so technically yes, but in all actuality, no. Galathran Riders charging forwards now, seeing an opportunity to take advantage of Cardolan as they flee back down the ramp. That's going to be enough to rout them as well. I mean, really turning the screw, but Galathran Riders are not going to want to chase them too far due to the presence of the Nurad Windblades. Try and do the same to them, perhaps? No. Seeing the traps that are laid for them, they think better of it. Still a half-decent Cardolan force here that can renew an assault if momentum starts to be gained in other parts of the settlement. Alcarondas Legion joining the front line as well. Axemen's lower numbers proving to be a bit of a concern here. Blackshot Dragon Slayers with some point-blank hits. Not bad from their perspective. Bardian Marksman. Still the Dalian Royal Guard as well, which still have their ammunition, so Dale living up to their reputation of having a lot of archers. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers moving just before the Cardolan artillery could zero in on them. But over here, Dalian Swordmass is completely surrounded by Dorwinion. Again, another unit that's isolated and is going to be finished off. There are other infantry units waiting around this corner though, so it's not a clear shot to wrap around this front line, but it's still the sort of thing. The question of numbers rearing its head once more, but this is where the attackers are focusing more of their strength, so this is the sort of outcome you would kind of expect, really. Defenders have had victories elsewhere, after all. This front line, meanwhile, has been fairly by the book, really. The notable thing has been what Arthedain have been doing with their skirmishers from an infantry perspective. The place the engagement had started is where it is still ongoing. So there is no great threat to either side. I mean, the loss of those trollmen, the addition of the troll slayers. From an infantry perspective, Arthedain will be the happier. Harad, from a long game perspective, because of all of the resources that have been used, maybe there is an opportunity for them. Both units of troll slayers are in melee now, though. Brotherhood of the Bow trying to do their thing. Kindred of Caliborn have arrived as well. They were all the way over on the other side of the map once, scurrying across to Arthedain's aid, but I'm not sure Arthedain really needed it, to be honest. Galathran Axemen. Cardolan Archers as well, looping those shots. Artillery, finally the defending artillery managing to get some nice hits there. Hasn't been plain sailing for Arthedain's forces so far, managing to destroy one of the Cardolan trebuchets as well as get some good infantry kills as well. Problem is though, if they really wanted to, well, there's some wasted shots, but now that they've made a little bit of progress up the hill, as soon as they commit infantry it is going to have the cover of those rocks, so chances of getting some absolutely clear-cut hits are not as high as they once were. Dragon Slayers, melee weapons drawn. We have been active for quite some time in this fight already, after all. Bouncing projectiles of the trebuchet could prove to be a threat, actually, given the weird geology and where all of the attackers are having to wait close by just so that they can potentially reinforce. Although, again, this Bard and Marksman, they're going to need to set up another front line. It probably has to be here. It's a pretty wide area to cover, but at this point the attackers are undoubtedly making territorial inroads. Getting the black shots to the front line there. Two smaller choke points easier to hold than one large one. Maybe considering the numbers the attackers have at their disposal, but I mean, let's not forget, Hand do have a fairly high cavalry contingent, which is only really useful if the battle were to open up. As long as you keep those choke points well marshalled, you might be just fine. Alagair archers and Cardolan archers looping a few shots, trying to do some damage to some of the reserves by the looks of things. Again, wide open area here. Might be worth them trying to retreat to the higher reaches of the settlement way back up here. Consolidate their position. Serpent Guard are fleeing. Arthedain have certainly taken some units off the front line. Kindred of Caliborn are actually pursuing them, along with some Arthedain man at arms. So Harad's attack has completely fallen apart as well. We've seen a Cardolan attack do the same, so two separate instances of the attackers having to start again at their beginnings. Axeman. Alagair archers still launching a few shots. Cardolan sharpshooters as well. Marksman looming. How much ammunition do the attackers still have in terms of their longer range projectiles over here? But things are a little bit messy now. Getting those units in might prove to have been a little bit of an error. Again, those Barding Herd and Staff Masters kind of turning around and trying to go on the attack, perhaps. I don't know if these units are necessarily the... Well, they're not going to have the damage dealing capabilities to be able to do that, and now they're going to get surrounded, so that was probably not the wisest course, especially when your main front line is already in danger of falling apart anyway. Worth a go, I suppose, but I don't think it's going to pan out, especially when you consider things are looking a little bit sparse, ever more so for Dale when it comes to their own reinforcements. Blade Riders on the way forward. More and more of the Dorwinion units taking advantage of the free space. Indian Royal Guard with ammunition as well. I mean, they haven't seen a huge amount of them. They could well have been firing when we weren't looking, but they can fire all they like. But I think the Elvelyn infantry is on the way to try and silence those bows. Now, I mean, they seem to be doubling down because they're sending more units in. Sindar Blade Masters, Dalian Paladins are in here as well. Royal Guard maybe being committed to melee also. They're going to need more in terms of numbers. If Lothlorien want this to happen, then they're going to have to be the ones to... That was a very fortuitous hit indeed, right into the centre mass of the Sindar Blade Masters. Bit of friendly fire, but definitely worth it considering the quantity of elves that they just managed to cook. Guard. A bit of a back and forth with the Morroquindi Stalkers now, which it's rare that a Horse Archer unit would be the efficient pick in this sort of back and forth, but on this occasion it is. And already this is, I mean, I don't know necessarily how Dale salvaged this front line in terms of making it an organised force, because I mean they've got several units of Barding Herd at this point have been committed to an engagement where they then immediately got surrounded. Needless to say, for a phalanx unit that is less than ideal. Very our course archers, close attendance as well, so all of these horse skirmishers actually proving to be fairly useful. Again, the Daily Royal Guard getting silenced, this time by the cavalry. Kind of hard to use the Nandor Glade Riders to their maximum in this kind of situation, but they shall give it a good go, I'm sure. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Glade Riders still running around. Victory seems certain for the Dalian Sword Masters as well. The support of the Elves being important. With the arrival of the Harbingers, other such units, I feel like, again, just with how chaotic this engagement is, it should favour the attackers considering what they will be prizing. Dragon Slayers as well. Meanwhile, still content to simply skirmish again, sending their shots high, but any damage done to the Elves here is going to be useful, especially once another attack starts to make its way forwards over here. Units wheeling around, Variag warriors this time from Khand. Khand going to have to take up the mantle of at least a token assault over here, just so they can't commit full reinforcements either to a renewed attack through the middle, or perhaps more pertinently over here where the attackers are having most joy. Going to need some extra quality on the front line perhaps though. Velen infantry certainly not going to enjoy the close attentions of the Dalian paladins, that's for sure. Herdsmen, Blackshot Dragon Slayers being run through by the Nandor Glade Riders, but I mean the Glade Riders are not going to be that thrilled about being in sustained melee with the Dragon Slayers. If they get a charge off though, just as deadly as some of the best heavy cavalry in the game, they're just far more fragile. And now with a bit of open field, room to move for some of their fast movers, which considering what Dorwinion and Khand have brought to the field today, it was always going to be somewhat important that they were able to secure some of that open field advantage, and they've managed to do so now. Hammerguard joining the Harbingers on the front line, and that level of quality has certainly tipped the balance on this front line over here. Dalian Royal Guard still able to get into a position to use their bows though. Arthedain Rangers on the way across, Galathran Nobles. In fact, Arthedain are sending some units over here, admittedly a unit of only 20 Rangers, but still. It's a sign that there is an acknowledgement that Dale are going to need some sort of support, otherwise things might be looking a little bit grim. The Troll Slayers, who were so instrumental in beating back that Haradrim attack on the other side of the map. Galathran Nobles, the Nandor Glade Riders well in behind enemy lines now. The Thala Rangers having to flee the scene. Still the ever-present danger of that artillery as well, which the attacking artillery has been far more consistent in this battle than the defending artillery has been. It's always a bit of a makes for grim reading and viewing for the defenders when you need your artillery to really be pulling its weight in this sort of battle. The Elven quality has helped though. They have actually managed to stabilise things over here. There's still units in behind enemy lines, and Dorwinion over here making a bit of a mess of the back lines, but the main columns the attackers could be delivering to the defenders at this point are actually not forthcoming because of the defence still being somewhat alive. Blackshot Dragon Slayers and Dalian Paladins. Dale, where they've committed their units to in this battle, they've been bold choices, because as their front line has been sort of falling apart, they've been trying to sort of counter-attack, but it hasn't really worked, and a big part of the problem has been they've been allowing attacking skirmishers get into good positions here. Again, the overall numbers means as much as they've been able to kind of break up the attackers a little bit in terms of distracting more of their units. not been able to make that stick for any length of time, because it just means they've been undermanned on 2 fronts. Small matter of the Hammer Guard who have breached over here as well, but the Troll Slayers represent a worthy foe for them. Moving forwards, the Dalian Spearmen. Caliborn on the way across as well. Guardians of Karas Galadon, Trebuchet Luminor. Plenty of units still can be committed to different areas. This, however, could prove to be a problem. Most of the units that were over here were very battered infantry or skirmishers that were out of ammunition, so Elven infantry should have no problem dealing with them on a one-to-one basis, but a fair amount of numbers, and there's also the Mumakil. Elven front lines are thin enough to the point where Mumakil are always going to be able to get in behind enemy lines, and they could make a real mess of things back here, which could prove to be very useful, as this is a front line which is opening up once again, Arthedain having to deal with a Candish assault this time. Murad Halberds. Murad Footman as well. Archers looping their shots overhead. I want to charge into this front line though with the Candish cavalry, considering the presence of the Arthedain pikemen that's still here. Still a bit of reinforcements, gate guards, defenders of Fornost, ruins of the north, so yeah, some significant units that can be committed, but it may be that they have to commit to 2 different fights, and again, gaps being found by the attackers, which has proven to be a little bit of a theme in this battle. Admittedly, finding it with a unit of unupgraded Balagire archers against the elves is probably something that's not likely to stick, but it follows the trend nonetheless. Still that arrow fire ripping through the air. Obviously the Mumakil have got those archers, which can be used to their fullest. Galathrun warriors on the way across, helping to surround and ultimately destroy the Hammer Guard. The elven armour piercing that Lothlorien are known for. Lothlorien's reinforcements have definitely proven to be pretty important. The attackers need to renew their efforts over here. They've got a lot of units that are hanging out back here, but not really doing a great deal. They have actually managed to stabilise things over here as well. That reinforcement force came just in time. Now moving forwards, the Kindred. The Glade Lords. Unsurprisingly, the Dorwinion General falls well in behind enemy lines, and perhaps now they can siphon off some extra resources to be used elsewhere. Gatekeepers are still there, Morroquendi Glade Lords.
We've lost half of our men.
It's looking a little bit more necessary now that the attackers make better use of that cavalry. There's the Wind Lance as well. Much more difficult to see where their projectiles are going, especially seeing as they're black arrows, and the ground of the Temple of Melkor is understandably black as well. Brotherhood of the Bow. And then we also have the Blood Trolls of Khand, the Oni. Defenders of Fornost, I mean, not the worst force to send against them, but they're going to need more of them. And all of a sudden, this is looking like more promising ground for the attackers than many of the other situations on the field at the moment. Victory seems certain. The Grey Company moving forward, another unit of mounted rangers for the defenders. There's still those javelins as well, so they've been used as a melee force without expending all their ammunition, which, again, it takes a good amount of forward planning for that to be enacted properly. Footman on the charge forwards. Yeah, just looking at this engagement, I mean, you see the Candish force. those Arthedain pikemen there. Proving to be fairly stalwart, but again with the addition of those blood trolls, more flaming shot coming in from the rangers. There's a lot of units coming forward from Cav though. And over here, ruffians retreating back down the hill, so content to just use all of their ammunition that they can before launching another probing attack. Wounds of Team Gorthad's still there, still the half guard, so some pretty significant units could make their presence felt over there, especially considering the Luma kill. Also, gatekeepers. Stalkers. I've just realised as well that I'm recording at around the same time the fire alarms get tested in this building as well, which is perhaps a problem. Exactly as a problem we ran into last time when I was recording. Lothlorien warriors ready to join the front line should they be needed. I mean, their armour piercing won't be quite so impactful as it was against Umbar and Dorwinion perhaps, but just the sheer attacking power might be the important thing here against the ground that Khand are continuously making. We shall see. Alright, footman. Still in a big snaking column as well. Birds. Harad warriors still there also. Elite units. I mean, those Kindred of Caliborn could move forwards at any given moment. Team Gorthad were thinking perhaps about moving forwards and leading the way as the vanguard of a new assault, but thinking better of it. I'm a bit surprised the Kindred of Caliborn are moving out here, exposing themselves to all of the missile troops that will still want to attack them. I mean, the Mumakil are their obvious choice of target, but it's not necessarily the best call when you've got all of those units ready and waiting specifically for you. Kindred of Caliborn, exactly the sort of unit that needs to be preserved as well from an attacking or defending perspective, I should say. Chieftain's Vanguard on the way forward now. Umbar Trebuchet on the way forth. Not a huge amount left for the attackers over here though. Bloody affair for both sides involved. They have claimed all of this territory, but I mean it's definitely cost them. A fully healthy unit of gatekeepers is certainly an important thing though. Cardolan staff masters, along with the Galathrin warriors. So the attack begins. Naranaharu Sentinels leading the way, having already taken a fair beating during the chaos of their previous engagement. Arthedain Spearman. Still some units up here, the wind plants. That's unfortunate. Artillery doing its thing. Again, everyone knows by this point that Medieval 2 with these cliffs within cityscape matches, you put your artillery anywhere near it, you are dancing with the devil. The wind plants proven to be the ideal case study there. The Variag warriors, meanwhile, armour upgrades and all making their way forwards. The Khandish numbers here prove to be a real problem for Arthedain, and consolidation is going to have to be the name of the game at this point, surely. Blood Trolls definitely did their job. Yeah, trying to bank up maybe with a choke point here and then along those structures over there, maybe that's the call. Problem is now though, some of these units might not have been given the memo and they're going to have to be left behind. Wind Blades are there. Arthedain Pikemen, one routing unit and one healthy unit. Interesting to see that the Thieves of Tharbad are charging directly onto the ends of those pikes, but managing to find those gaps. Those sickles of theirs very useful in close proximity to those pikes. Yeah, good territorial gains now for the attackers. Mumakil still all of them alive, so they could cause some havoc during the final stand. Cardolan archers, plenty of these skirmishing units, and having to cover both of these internal structures and then also fight for the hilltop as well. So there's still 3 angles that the defenders are having to cover. As the battle goes on, as the defenders in this sort of situation, what you really want is to reduce the number of choke points, and maybe defending this hill here would have been better, even though these choke points within these buildings are very, very tempting. You're actually having to guard multiple ones of them as well, so you're going to have to hope that individual units are capable of the kind of performance that you would want them to have. So it's going to come down to more so quality in those engagements in there. The defenders have enough of that left. Trebuchet moving further forwards, which is bold. I don't know how much ammunition it necessarily had left. Not the best performance from the defending Trebuchet once again. Murad footmen going up against the Trebuchet crew now. Those Warhammers capable of good damage.
We will smash the enemy.
Again, they're having to be fairly frugal with their remaining reinforcements here. What they're doing with their wind lance. Could prove to be a very important decision to make. The Mumakil are there also. Karen Amroth Rangers firing away. Okay, that's good damage from them. Is it going to be enough? Especially when they're taking immediate return fire from the Cardolan archers. In terms of damage, the elves are far superior, but they're also pretty fragile with that very light armour of theirs. Tharbad. Catherine Noble's still in good health also. It's the sort of unit that they're going to need to lean on pretty heavily. Again, fleeing though, I mean that is part of the problem for the attackers over on this side. They've taken enough damage to the point where single units for the defenders could well be enough to see them over the line. Perhaps the temptation of going after that remaining Cardolan Trebuchet and the Umbar one as it moves forward as well. Simply too great, breaking from their defensive position, the Staff Masters now. Preventing the Umbar Trebuchet from laying down its damage. One of the Wind Lance actually managed to push its way back up the hill, which is fairly impressive. Rangers of Castamere. Still looping those shots overhead. Daily Royal Guard still waiting. Force on the way back up the hill. Fine margins here. Considering the chaotic nature of some of these fights, it's going to be a difficult task, or more difficult task for Can to force their way through over here in the way that they managed down there, simply because the choke point is not as wide, and also there's nowhere really for Arthedain to retreat to, so they're going to have to fight to the bitter end. The Blood Trolls were instrumental though in forcing their way through last time. They could be again, considering a big fulcrum of this defence is going to be the Anuminous Gate Guards, fighting away as they are. Caliborn. Troll Slayer, still some javelins by the looks of things, based on the fact that they're still holding them. Wind Lance firing away. To shoot down into the attackers there. Arthedain Spearmen. Balagire Archers surrounding this unit of Staff Masters. That's been a real calling card of this battle as well. Little counter-attacks by the defenders that are then surrounded and dealt with by the attackers, but having said that, When you look at the number of the attackers that still remain, I mean, it's not exactly a foregone conclusion that all of this is going to add up in the long run. A lot of what they have left are archers as well. How much damage are they really going to be able to do? Rangers. Oof. Point blank into the Windlance crew, who they themselves are actually one of the bigger threats when it comes to a melee force. Rangers managing to fire into that blob, which has appeared as a result of that counter-attack as well, so the sword that cuts both ways. Four Othala Rangers remaining, but if they still have ammunition, all of that ammunition is going to be pretty vital as the battle wears on. It seems certain for the Candish attackers at the moment. Sharpshooters. Still got a good amount of forces back here from Harad as well. That's a big quality spike that can be committed. Demons of the Desert as well with a bit of room. Could be devastating, especially with a more limited array of projectiles that the defenders will be able to call upon now. Albeit the Windlance still operational. Is it going to be able to get any good shots though? It's reloading, so it's going to hit something. Pinpoint accurate as it is. Thorn arrows still doing nothing as well. Point blank into the Cardolan archers. It's better than getting no kills at all with it at this point, so you may as well dump the ammunition as best as you are able. Balagair archers trying to force the issue over here, but they will be immediately met by Galathran warriors and stop dead in their tracks. Still more of those spearmen. It's an awkward force to deal with for the defenders over on this side, but it still needs to be done. I think the main threat is going to come from probably what's left of Harad, actually. All the trollmen, the Mumakil. They could start to run over your units, and that would be a big, big problem. Sharpshooters. Still with those bolts, wind blades. Depleted Thieves of Tharbad here. Come the other Harad elites. Mumakil, meanwhile, taking hits from those Galathran nobles. It's going to be a case of use them or lose them at this point for the Mumakil. They've been conservative enough. I think the time has come now for them to just try and force their way through the gap. Even if they end up dying on the way through, the gaps they will cause for their own infantry force will allow them to flood forwards and probably win the battle. Windlance trampling down the hill. Another calling card of this battle in particular has been arrows and range fire just zipping back and forth all over the place. Nomadic archers. Chieftain's Vanguard again, firing point blank, another weird eccentricity of this battle in general. Way long into the abyss behind the temple. Davian Royal Guard. Tharbad Warhammer's still alive, so Cardolan revealing a bit of their own quality. quality that both sides still have in the back pocket. And that's going to be enough. Remains to be seen, I suppose. Defenders are full lost. Nobles, ruffians. Leaving the front line again. Interesting call. Perhaps going to rely purely on the strength of their trollman units. In there. Is that going to be enough though? I mean, we've got the Elven Kindred of Caliborn in there. You've still got a good amount of those Arthedainian pikes, to be honest. Doomvine Troll Slayers, who have been a real stalwart for Arthedain in this battle as well, I will say. Used quite well by Arthedain. Trebuchet left behind by Arthedain also. Still no sign of the Mumakil making their way back up here. Galathram Nobles. Some warriors on a bit of a counter attack as well. Warhammers.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
Yeah, I mean, just the sheer heft that the attackers still have, with a bit of that extra quality mixed in. I mean, they do still have some units of real quality, the defenders, but again, as is often the case in a 3v5, numbers may very well prove to betray them in the end. Trollman of Harad. Footman. One of the Mumakil has died off, again out of combat as well.
They have lost half their men.
Just throw them in at this point. If you get them right in and amongst things, I know the pikes are there, but you'll cause gaps, and that will allow your trollmen and your champions of Nafrat to go about their grisly work. Like I said, it's a case of use them or lose them. A trap many a player falls into. Saving a unit for a day that never comes. Umbar also trying to hit the back lines with their own trebuchet. That's threading the needle, certainly. They're doing very well to get any sort of shots there. Has died, the other one trapped on the trebuchet, so actually parking it there has proven to be somewhat useful. Another hit into the Winged Lance crew. Still some archers, the Wardens of the North no less. They've maybe been left a little bit too late to be utilised as well. Opposite problem to what we saw early doors. Are getting in amongst things now, forcing their way back. Pikes will kill it off though. He stood right in the way. And there they go. There'll also be something of at least a visual obstacle for all the players involved. Kings of the Desert. Not the ideal angle for them, but they are going after the Wardens of the North with their very, very deadly javelins. Over here, meanwhile, the elves doing their best to fight inside this structure. Actually, how far that armour's doing nicely. Elite Elven Pike against Elite Cardolan Pike with a bodyguard unit alongside them as well. Back elves in this fight actually, I'm a little surprised. The Thieves of Tharbad being present probably was tipping the balance. And this Cardolan have simply got more in the way of reinforcements to give. As the Reforged Arthedain still marshalling the situation over here, but I don't know how valuable that's going to be. The Narunahari Royal Guard will slowly but surely be victorious here as well. Of the north. Still a potential threat in terms of their melee prowess. They will be overrun surely. Again, fortunately we're seeing this from the perspective of Cardolan, I believe. Can't quite remember, but if we are, we'll be able to see how effective these crossbows have been, because I think they've quietly had an important impact, as they often do in a siege battle. And again, Galathrim nobles taking up the same position the Ones of the North did, but encountering similar problems to the unit that preceded them on this little hillock. And they'll still have ammunition left in reserve at this point, and they're not going to be able to find a place to utilise it effectively. As much as we said that about the Mumakil, the same is also true about the Silverthorn and Steel Bows from the Galathrim nobles and the Ones of the North respectively. You use it or you lose it. Cardolan archers forcing their way in as well. Numbers. Thieves of Tharbad getting in and amongst the Galathrim warriors. That's an interesting fight, that actually. It's not often the elves are the ones that are a little bit more barbaric in their focus, but it is on this occasion. Defenders are foremost, 84 of them remain. So Rangers are Castamere still. Looks like they've been savaged at range at some point. Only 17 of them left. Still. Forgot about Monsoon. Very nice unit to close things out with. I mean, the cavalry was definitely a risk, and there were moments in this battle where the attackers looked like they were running out of steam, with not quite enough infantry. Just about okay, I think. And that is the risk of having a cavalry-heavy force. I don't think it was more the ranged cavalry that did do a good job because of their ranged weapons, but I don't think the melee cavalry was really all that impactful in this battle at all. We were never really able to find the room. There was that one instance of the Nandor Glade Riders over there, but other than that, cavalry is always pretty expensive. So you can't say it was the biggest star on display today. Ranged units doing the business in melee with their ranged weapons and their melee weapons was probably the story of both sides, to be honest. Over here. Yeah, Trebuchet moving all through now, moving in, surrounding the Arthedain spearmen so they won't be lasting too much longer. It's really just a case of how much resistance the defenders can put up at this point. The attackers will be victorious. Yeah. Sharpshooters. Royal Guard still alive as well, considering the sticky situation they were in early on. It's fairly impressive that they are still here. Radwing blades. Charge through now. The Mumakil are gone, but regular cavalry can still perform the role of being a high mass kind of unit just to mess front lines up, and it's not really much of a front line anymore. It's more just a sort of smattering of resistance that still remains. Some of the Arthedain units left behind. To be fair, Galathrim nobles are going to take some beating in melee. There go the wind blades. stalkers. So now the cavalry is going to be able to get a little bit of room to flourish, but it's only really in clean-up duty. It's not anything impactful on the overall result of the fight. It's the elves fighting in this structure still, surrounded as they are, the ruffians joining in now as well. How undignified.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Guardians of Cardolan. Bloodied as they are, resilient as ever though. Gatekeepers in behind the lines as well, facing off against the defenders of Fornost. They've been active for a fair amount of time in this battle, assisting with the initial Umbar Dorwinion push. There are a lot of phases to this fight as well, a lot of different areas where things took place. And considering how big this map is, it's always a bit of a feat when you can use so much of it. This is very often a map I find in the past where the initial front lines have been the ones where the battle has begun and ended. So it's always nice when that doesn't happen. There's a little bit more variety. Wind blades. Receiving certain. Well, actually no. There's the Umbar trebuchet. Waiting at the back. Surely at this stage of proceedings you would want to at least dip your toe into a melee engagement. I suppose they did earlier on. They got it forced upon them by the staff ministers. Dale's general falls. He's been close to the action for quite a while at this point, so lived a charmed existence, perhaps. Was another general? I guess that was. I guess that was a Cardolan. I guess it must have been. Weird. Nothing's left at this point. Victory for the attackers there. I see. Amroth Rangers. I give the spearmen their due. They lasted long enough to outlast the defence at the top of the hill, but they're now going to flee. The Rangers are going to do the same. Which begs the question once more. I think that means that the final resistance is going to be put up by the elves in this small structure over here. Backs to the wall for those pikemen. Yeah, melee range against the Tharbad Warhammers is going to be kind to no one. The elves are no exception there. Kindred victory. Still looking likely for them. Our horse archers charging forwards. What remains of them? Another unit which was firing at point blank range during those earlier stages of the battle. Tharbad Warhammers in the mix also. Stalkers. Yeah, the rest of the unit streaming down here now. Nothing on the other side. Ah, no, there is. Hearthguard of Amon Sul, who are fully healthy, I think. So they didn't really dip their toes into a melee engagement, really, either. And you can't really call this doing that. The gatekeepers. Harad Wind Blades. Yeah, more of an insurance policy, I suppose, the Wind Blades against enemy cavalry, so you can always justify their inclusion. But there we have it. Yeah, 7% seems about right. It ebbed and flowed a little bit, but the attackers never let things get too far away from them. I mean, I know that 2 of their attacks did fall apart, but they were more engineered a little bit. You know, they kind of knew that the fight was a little bit too costly for them, so they eased up a bit. But yeah, I mean, what could the defenders have done differently? Maybe fallen back a little bit more quickly. I think, in particular, the fight with Dale over on that side. Things got a bit too chaotic too quickly, and in a 5v3, that's never really going to be to your merit as a defender. You know, falling back and then maybe defending as they did in those structures and up on that hill a little bit earlier was probably the call. Let's see what did the damage for Cardolan. Harad of Amonsul not really involved. The crossbows were okay, you know, not devastating in the way that they can be, but again, it is a 5v3, so breaking 100 kills if you're the attacker is always going to be pretty good. Tharbad Warhammers, especially considering the level of opponent they were up against, that's a very good return from them. 583 on the Trebuchet of Numenor, so very clearly the attacking artillery was stronger, and that's also something else which the defenders can look back upon. If their artillery had been a little bit better, things could have very easily turned around in the other direction. But artillery is one of those things where it's all well and good saying that it should have been better, but you know, you're putting yourself at the hands of RNG a little bit if you're using it, whether you're the attacker or the defender. Just so happens the attackers got the rub of the green here. So yeah, big thank you to Nuke for sending this one in. Big thanks to all the players as well for being a part of this battle replay. Still got a backlog that I'm looking to clear as far as what else is going to be happening. It's going to be a very busy time because I'm going to be moving house pretty soon. So that's going to be something which is hopefully not going to impact the current schedule, but it does mean that my plans to try and clear a bit of the backlog by doing the occasional midweek video is probably not going to happen, at least for the time being. As soon as I'm moved in, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, big thank you to all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.